I've been one of the area supervisors at the City of David now for about 4 years, and working with some very brave men. The City of David, we often think, refers to Bethlehem, and there is a sense in which that can be called the City of David, but that's a term that was used by David to refer to the city that he conquered from the Jebusites, that was Jerusalem. 1 Samuel 5 tells us the king and his men went to Jerusalem against the Jebusites. The inhabitants of the land, they said to David, "You'll not come in here, but the blind, the lame will turn you away, thinking David cannot enter here." It was a highly fortified city. This is long after they conquered the land, took possession of it, lived in it. This is about the last thing that was done. Back all the way to David's time, this was a strong fortification that hadn't been conquered. Nevertheless, David captured the stronghold of Zion, that is, the city of David. And we continue to read how that happened. Verse 8, David said on that day, "Whoever climbs up by the way of the water shaft and defeats the Jebusites, the lame, blind, hated by David, so he shall be chief and captain." So as we read the story, we find that Joab was one who was brave enough to go up the water shaft and got inside the city, opened the gates and said, "Okay, fellas, come on in." And they marched in and took the city. Verse 9 says, "So David lived in the stronghold and called it the City of David. David built all around from the Milo inward." This Milo, we didn't know what that was. I think we've got a pretty good idea at this point. David became greater and greater, for the Lord of hosts was with him. Then Hiram, king of Tyre, sent messengers to David with cedar trees and carpenters and stonemasons, and they built a house for David. Okay, here's this great king with these great monuments that were built, monumental buildings, and he became greater and greater. Where's the evidence? Well, there's sort of a catch-22 here. What happened? The Babylonians came in and destroyed it, didn't they? And what happens to cedar when you set fire to it? It burns. And if you were to find this house of David, built of cedar and, of course, stone as well, then you'd know the story was false. But you don't find it. They say, well, see, it's false. But you should find evidence and foundations and indications that it was there, and indeed we do. But let's look at some historical background to the contest here over the City of David, and begin with Kathleen Kenyon again. She was, of course, from Oxford and is noted for modernized archaeology in Israel. That means she got people to disbelieve the Bible. She worked in Jericho from 52 to 58, as we've indicated, and spent time then, after she finished in Jericho, at the City of David from 61 to 68. And here is her conclusion. "It may seem disappointing that the excavations have discovered none of the buildings of David's city. Virtually no area remains in which there's any hope of the finds of the period. The whole of this area must therefore be written off as far as any knowledge of early Jerusalem is concerned." So just forget about it. There's nothing here. Go away. Don't even look. I've looked, and it's over. And a lot of people were influenced by that. She died, and then Yagil Shiloh took over the excavations at the City of David and did a very courageous job. Now, he became sick and died an early death. He excavated from 78 to 85 and died before his finds were published, but he refuted Kenyon's work, just step by step. He's a very courageous person. Jane Cahill is in the process of publishing his work, and I have received copies of the original work, and it is in the process of being published. In the meantime, since he died, the digs there in the City of David have been taken over by Ronnie Rach and Ellie Sukron, who is my supervisor, one that we've worked with there for a number of years. And these, I think, are very brave men exposing the truth under fierce opposition. Now, Ronnie Rach is more of the politician. He doesn't come out as brashly as Ellie Sukron does, who just tells it like it is and has gotten in some trouble, but nevertheless are fighting for the truth. On the other side, opposing what they're doing, are men like Israel Finkelstein of Tel Aviv University. He's director of the Institute of Archaeology. And I think you need to know what's being said in opposition to get the context of these investigations. He says, and this was in 2003, almost no signs of monumental building operations. The mythical united monarchy is a literary construct. And from the way he's standing there, you can get an idea where he's coming from. And that's not an illusion. He's not a Bible believer, obviously. In fact, he was lecturing here in the United States recently, and his seminar was entitled, "What? No Moses?" And of course, that's what he was contending for. His colleague, David Yashishkin, there at Tel Aviv University, made this comment in the same publication: "I'm afraid the evidence regarding the magnificent Solomonic capital was not discovered because it is non-existent, not because it's still hidden in the ground." Now that's in Israel, where they have some opposition, and that may sound like wild and reckless, but you haven't seen wild and reckless till you get over into Europe, where they build on that and just really exaggerate. Here's Niels Peter Lamech at the University of Copenhagen. "Archaeological data have now definitely confirmed that the empire of David and Solomon never existed." Now, how does archaeological data confirm that something never existed? You could confirm something did exist, but maybe you find something tomorrow that confirms it that you haven't found today, and so anyway, that's another story. Jane Cahill, the successor, at least publisher, of Shiloh's material, is likewise a courageous individual who's fighting back. And in Biblical Archaeological Review, 2004, she says the most frequently voiced argument by those who challenge the historical existence of the united monarchy is a supposed, and I'd underscore supposed, lack of archaeological evidence. Now, you don't find the Palace of David with all the cedar planks in this huge structure, monumental buildings that were destroyed by Babylonians and by Romans, but still it's appropriate to say it is a supposed lack of evidence. In most cases, she continues saying these arguments are either grossly misleading, illogical, disingenuous, or all three. Now you might think, well, she's a little over the top here in her response, but let's look at the evidence first before you make that judgment and see if that kind of a statement is justified.